Hi, and welcome to another episode of I'll Go If You Go. I'm your host, Emily Harwitz. So far this season, we've spent a lot of time with the coast redwoods. Well, today, we're going to check up on the redwoods of the Sierra Nevada range, the Giant Sequoias. And who better to do that with than our guest, Neida Rodriguez, a current Giant Sequoia Forest Fellow. Growing up, Neida didn't know that she could work in conservation, but she did know that she loved trees and wanted to give back to them. Now, she's studying forestry while helping steward the biggest trees on Earth. Get ready for some boots-on-the-ground stories about what she does, sees, learns, and loves about working out there amongst the giants. We're here, as you can hear, recording from the Save the Redwoods League office in downtown San Francisco. Hey, Neida, how's it going?
It's going good.
So you're here all the way out from the land of the giant sequoia.
Yeah.
How does it feel to be downtown surrounded by giant buildings instead of trees?
It feels a little different. Oddly enough, I feel a lot more lost here than I ever do in a forest because the city is such a different element for me. But it feels good to be here with you guys.
So what does a Giant Sequoia Forest Fellow do?
That's a good question. I would say we wear so many different hats, but like in a nutshell, we do help with the ongoing restoration projects over in the Western Divide Ranger District of the Giant Sequoia National Monument, as well as on our Alder Creek property in order to mitigate wildfire behavior around giant sequoias. So that's what we're doing.
And wildfire behavior, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so hundreds of years of fire suppression and indigenous removal, the forest isn't in the greatest condition right now. And so when wildfires do come, burns a little too hot, and so our job is to come in and sort of mitigate that by doing fuels reductions and removing as much biomass as we can before we can safely reintroduce fire.
So what does that look like your day-to-day?
During the field season is a lot more fun. We're flagging out our project sites and units, and especially flagging out our natural and cultural resources in order to protect them so that, we're not trampling all over region or cutting down trees in cultural sites. And so that's the majority of the work. We mainly target the giant sequoia groves, so we'll look for giant sequoias and sort of remove fuels within 25 feet around them, and then just continue to do that throughout the groves.
For our listeners who don't know what fuels reduction means, fuels is anything flammable, and reduction is just removing that.
So there would be trees that would consistently be checked by fires or cultural burning, but with the removal of fire and also indigenous folks, nothing has really kept them in check, and so they continue to grow. And so now you have this really dense forest where crown fires easily get into the canopies of giant sequoias and other prioritized species like our sugar pines, so all these larger trees. And so by removing fuels, you reduce that crown fire risk. And in some cases, we are removing super deep packs of like duff layer. We're removing duff layer from around the cavities of giant sequoias, because when the fires do come in and they're burning that duff layer that's been building up for so many years, it's kind of creating, especially in that cavity, it's creating so much more heat. And so the cavity just continues to get larger and larger into the giant sequoia. And so that's part of what we do as well, is not just the fuels, which are considered the trees around connecting fire into the canopies of giant sequoias, but also some duff layer in some areas.
So what kind of a background do you need to get into this kind of work and be able to spend all day in the sequoia?
You do need some sort of background in like environmental sciences or forestry. For a while, I was doing environmental resource management, and I knew I loved trees, and so that's what mainly called me over here to Save the Redwoods League. And then as I'm shadowing our registered professional forester, he's sort of mentoring me, and I'm sort of finding my way through him. And so now I'm really into forestry, especially forest restoration. And so that's the track that I'm going down. I don't think I come from a very traditional background. I grew up in the Central Valley here in California in a migrant household. And so it wasn't really something we're familiar with. And so as an adult, I started exploring these spaces. And I'm sort of finding my way. I went on a hike one day and wondered how I can give back, and then fell into a naturalist position at a local preserve, and then from there, really fell in love with the maintenance and restoration side of things. So I became a land steward and then became a ranger for some time. And so just kind of really following what excites me and what fulfills me. And it's always been the field of restoration and conservation. And I'm just finding my way as an adult. Nobody's held my hand and is like, hey, you should work in these spaces. So I'm kind of discovering them. Like, I've only ever camped as an adult or like gone to the beach as an adult.
Without those people showing you the way in the outdoors conservation restoration field, how have you been able to maintain, I guess, the motivation to keep going?
Just continuing to do what fulfills me and giving back. These green places did so much for me when I discovered them that I just feel the need to give back. And at this point, I feel like I'm part of this ecosystem as well, and I have that responsibility. And it's really funny because I don't think my family understands what I do. They just think I run around in the forest, and it's very strange to them. And so I try to explain what I do, but it's just something that they don't understand, and so I think it's funny. I'm like, okay, the giant sequoias. This is in Spanish. We're like removing fuels, trying to save them, and they're like, yeah, she works over there at the park. I'm like, okay, not exactly what I do. And it's strange, and it's not traditional for them, and so they're scared and they don't understand it. They're like, yeah, you should carry some protection with you, and so you can defend yourself, or you never know, and you're really out there with no signal. It's very, very different. So I consider myself very fortunate, and I feel like I really hacked into this world. And I see myself in the conservation field. I don't see myself doing anything else.
That's really cool. I love that story of you following what you were curious about and what you cared about. That's one of the things I love most about the work that I do as a science journalist, is getting to ask questions and then see, try to find out the answers and see where that leads me.
And the results is always so rewarding. Like whether you're working on something as small as planting some flowers, and now we're working with these giant sequoias, like seeing a project from start to finish, it's extremely rewarding. It's just when you really start seeing yourself as part of the ecosystem in these places, it's just, I can't describe it other than rewarding.
Yeah, I think that is such an important point, that we as people, we're animals, we're part of nature too, and we are part of these ecosystems, and indigenous people they lived on the land until they were removed, and now we're putting people back in the landscape to help steward these places again.
Yeah, I genuinely think we're responsible for, and we have a responsibility to restore a lot of these places. Like we're seeing our giant sequoias, they're really falling victim to the removal of indigenous people as well as fire suppression, and now I really do think that we have a responsibility to restore the forest. It's in a really unhealthy condition in certain areas. And that's just been such a rewarding aspect of my job, to be part of such amazing projects and collaborate with other agencies and just see how they're managing their lands and what's working for them, and how we're all just part of this mission now. It's just been amazing.
Cool. Can you give me an example of one of the projects you've seen from start to finish?
Ooh, yeah. Our Long Meadow project, so Long Meadow Grove. It's my first season with the league as well, and so we saw it from start to finish. So we're hiking in there in the snow, checking out the site, flagging off areas before operations, and we completed it. It's over 600 acres.
What was the goal? Was this marking fuels for to take out?
Yeah, so this was marking fuels and removing fuels around giant sequoias to mitigate wildfire behavior. So a lot of it went over to biomass, and a lot of the extra mass, we piled it and burned it. And then whatever went to the mill went right back into the project. So that was one of the most exciting projects.
So with this restoration work that you're doing, you were just telling me that you work on one giant sequoia grove at a time, and each grove is part of the bigger landscape of giant sequoia, part of the landscape of the forest. And by restoring the groves, you're adding resilience back into the landscape.
Exactly. Yeah, you're adding the resilience back into the species. because the giant sequoias are at risk due to, years of drought, fire suppression, and now we're hearing beetles. And so by restoring and removing fuels, you are reintroducing and kind of assisting with the resilience that they've once had.
So in a way, you're helping to restore natural processes back, because fire is a natural process of this environment. How did you hear about the Giant Sequoia Forest Fellowship?
I think one of my friends was looking up jobs, and he suggested that he's like, this would be perfect for you. He knows my love for trees. And I just decided to apply, and it's just been really interesting. A really interesting journey. I didn't think I'd get it. I mean, I talk about this a lot with my colleagues, how I suffer a little bit with imposter syndrome because, I didn't come from a traditional background of conservation. And so I'm still finishing school, and it's one of my biggest goals. But I've been extremely fortunate enough to be able to work in my field while also going to school. And I think that's extremely rare, especially in the Central Valley. These opportunities don't come across often. So when there is an opportunity like this, I see it because there's not many. I'm always looking for conservation jobs near me.
What are you most looking forward to with this upcoming field season? Summer is around the corner.
Yes, and I am so excited. It has been a great winter, but I am such a field person, so I cannot wait to get back out in the field. I'm excited to work on a new grove. We are working on Paxado Grove this year. And also, I'm extremely excited to start the apprentice program that I've been working on all winter. And our apprentice program it's sort of an apprenticeship for foresters of Reedley and Bakersfield College. And I've been working on this all winter, and so I'm excited that it's finally coming to light, especially because now I get to give back to the community that I grew up in. There's going to be more opportunities for folks in the Central Valley to get back out or get their first experience in the field, and that's extremely important. And just the short interviews that I've done this week, I've already heard the fact that they're excited and that these opportunities don't come around, and so I'm excited that I'm going to be doing what I love in the groves, but also giving back to my community or assisting that.
So does that mean you will have apprentices with you?
Yeah, we'll have apprentices with our team. So it'll be myself and then another Giant Sequoia Forest Fellow will be on the field with 4 apprentices this year.
That's awesome. What excites you about this new grove you're going to work on?
The fact that there's wolves in the area.
That is amazing. So when can I come out to the field with you and see these wolf tracks?
Anytime, especially this summer, you should come out.
Yes. Okay, I'm there. So what do you like the most about doing field work?
It's just what I find the most fulfilling is when I'm out in the field. That's just the best office. You can't, offices don't get better than Giant Sequoia Groves. And I'm so fortunate and I'm so aware of that. And just early field days, carrying all your field gear and all your equipment and monitoring and just really looking at these groves from the top down and recognizing and seeing all these the regeneration of giant sequoias, protecting streams, finding cool little critters. It's just running around groves is just, and learning them, and they're all so different. And that's just the most fulfilling part. I just feel like I never want to stop exploring, and there's always so much to know, especially in these groves. They're just so interesting.
Yeah, so you get to be physically present, physically active, discovering new things all the time, surrounded by beauty. It sounds incredible.
Yeah, I feel like foresters wear so many hats because as a forester, you're looking at streams, you're looking to protect your natural resources. You're also looking at the geology of things. You're looking at wildlife. If there's a nest in a tree, I'm flagging it as a wildlife tree. if there is a tree, a dead snag, a dead tree, that would be considered perfect for wildlife. I'm going to flag it. And so you're wearing all these different like wildlife hats. You're protecting cultural resources, you're protecting regeneration. And as a forester, you really get like a broad feel to what the forest is as a whole.
You get that bird's eye view of the story of what's happening in the forest.
Exactly.
You get to really know all of your characters.
Yeah.
And you've mentioned multiple times that you love trees. What do you love about trees?
There are so many things to love about trees. They're just these giant organisms that are just so smart. They connect with each other and they provide so much habitat, especially oak trees. Surprisingly, oak trees are one of my favorites. They just provide so much habitat for wildlife and they're just amazing. And I do really believe we're part of the planet and we're part of the ecosystem as a whole. And when you're looking at these places, like I just got back from the Giant Sequoia Lands Coalition, and being in a room full of so many experts really puts things into perspective for you, especially when you're all on the same page and understand the goal and are looking and working towards this mission. Is like you see these giant sequoia groves and we love our sequoias. And a lot of folks there mentioned, like, they're not museums. You know, you can't just keep them there forever. They're a living organism that has a cycle that needs to continue. And by suppressing fire, that's never been part of that ecosystem is fire suppression. Fire has always been part of the ecosystem. So looking at everything in a holistic perspective, I feel like is this job it is what it is. And I think that's really changed my aspect of my perception of life as a whole.
I think that's such a cool framing of conservation, of restoration, this idea that a forest, it's something that we live alongside of. And as stewards of the land, how do we help it best live its life on its own terms?
On its own terms is a very big highlight for sure. Because forests have their own ecosystems and their own journey. And if that means like eventually a fire will take out an old giant sequoia, as long as it's part of the system and not due to something like fire suppression, then that's okay, in my opinion. You know, everything's a cycle of life.
What do you think forest restoration needs more of in terms of restoring giant sequoia species?
I believe that it needs to be continued to be managed, and the reintroduction of traditional ecological knowledge has been missing, as well as fire, and it definitely needs some continued help, especially for the conservation of the species, of the giant sequoia species.
How are they doing?
So there's a lot of different reports and opinions. From what I've seen firsthand, you know, there's a lot of groves that have been severely affected by our wildfires. And there's been series of wildfires. And it's really scary to see a 3,000, 4,000-year-old tree be killed by a wildfire. And I'm sure there's more aspects. That kind of goes back to what I said, feeling responsible for that as humans, for the fire suppression, is the fact that a tree can die on our watch that has lived for so long. It's a little scary to me. So I'm really glad that I'm working towards preventing that and restoring the forest back to a healthy state. I also do want to say that all of this work is done, not just myself. You know, we have an awesome team and we collaborate with our agencies and friends. And so we're all working towards this mission. So we work with the Forest Service. So we do basically contract work for them. But also our partners, you know, over at the Tule River Tribe, we want to make sure that they're also feel like they're included like they should be, and making sure that, you know, we're all on the same page when it comes to stewarding these landscapes. It's extremely important that we make sure that they're also involved. The Tule River Tribe is also involved, and the local tribes as well. There's also not federally recognized tribes. And so just making sure everyone has a seat at the table and a voice at the table, the people who need to.
You mentioned earlier the Giant Sequoia Landscape Coalition. Can you tell me a little more about that and what that is?
Yeah, so the Giant Sequoia Lands Coalition is a sort of a coalition that has all different agencies, so nonprofits and government agencies that all manage giant sequoia groves. And so it's kind of a place and a coalition where people who do manage these groves can come together and share that they're managing styles and what's working for them and research and science. So it's really a great way to continue giant sequoia restoration in these groves.
When you seek nature, what do you look for? Or where do you go?
Personally, I love the desert so much, especially in the springtime. The desert is so alive. People think that there's nothing in the desert. And it's really funny because I work in the forest, but the desert is also one of my favorite ecosystems, just to see how much it's adapted to its environment, and like looking at the little small flowers in the springtime and like just looking at the little creeks. That's one of my favorite things to do, is go into the desert. But I also love and look for ecosystem, like little tiny things. It's always the little things. So like the lichen on the rocks, and like looking at all the different colored lichens, and then looking at what's under the logs. Be careful because there can be snakes. But also listening to the birds. I love birds. And so hearing them just in these spaces, especially around this time, it just brings me a lot of tranquility.
This season of I'll Go If You Go, we're highlighting some of the many jobs you can work in conservation and the outdoors. And if you're interested in working with Save the Redwoods League, check out our careers page on savetheredwoods.org/about-us/careers. Hope to hear from you. We've made it to the lightning round. All right, Neida, first question. If you could work in another capacity in the forest, what would you do?
Oh, that is so hard to say because, like I said, foresters wear so many hats, so I get the broad range of things.
Yeah, you're not allowed to be a forester in this scenario, but you can do anything else.
I would be botany. Botany would be so much fun. I love keying and IDing plants. I do admit that I need to get better at it, but botany would be so much fun.
I agree. Okay, second question. If you were a sequoia, where would you be and why?
I don't know what grove I would like to be in, but I would like to be near a body of water because bodies of water attract lots of little critters, and I would have lots of friends to hang out with.
I want to be in the grove with wolves.
That's a good one.
Last lightning round question. You are going to spend a day in the Sequoias, with the Sequoias. What are 3 things you're taking with you?
First aid kit is by default, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So water, snacks, and a field guide of the area because there is hardly any signal, and I would go crazy if I couldn't ID a bird that I really wanted to ID. So a field guide.
Cool. Well, that sounds great, and I can't wait to come out into the Sequoias with you.
I can't wait to have you.
A field guide and some water.
Okay, you said it.
Wait a second. What snacks would you bring?
What snacks? Ooh, chips. I love crunchy, salty chips. So some sort of salt kettle cooked chip. Mm-hmm. Those are the best.
Yum.
Especially after a long field day or hike.
Well, it sounds like a good time.
Yeah.
And I can't wait to get out there with you.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us today on I'll Go If You Go, Neida. This was so much fun.
Thank you so much for having me. I hope that I represented the giant sequoias well. But yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us on I'll Go If You Go, a Save the Redwoods League podcast. This season is produced by Leslie Parra and hosted, edited, and sound engineered by Emily Harwitz. Thank you to Adam Kaplan for tech support, and Caleb Castle, Marcos Castañeras, and Mary McFeely for graphic design and media support. Theme song and music are by Nu Nguyen and Annie Fung. You can find seasons 1, 2, and 3 wherever you listen to podcasts or on savetheredwoods.org, where you can also find transcripts of each episode. If you like our show, please rate and review. It helps more people find us and join in the conversation. For behind the scenes and bonus content, follow us on Instagram at I'll Go If You Go Pod. If you have comments or questions, you can email us at outreach@savetheredwoods.org. We'd love to hear from you and maybe even share your comments on the podcast. And that's all, folks. Catch you next time.